morning. Welcome to today's Lexington Remembers conversation. We are continuing the work begun in about 2005 by Mary Gillespie, Dan Fenn, and Jackie Ward, which we have over that time conducted over 75 interviews with Lexingtonians to capture their memories of Lexington. These interviews have been posted on our YouTube, so you can just check it out, Lexington Remembers on YouTube. I'm Donna Hooper, and today with me is fellow Lexington Remembers member Peter Kelly. And today, June 9th, 2022, we have the privilege of interviewing long-term Lexingtonian Paul Ross. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for coming, Paul.
We hope that Paul will share with us some of his memories of life in Lexington and the involvement of the Ross family since their arrival in the early 1900s.
Yes.
So again, welcome.
Thank
Can you give us a sense, Paul, of the Ross family and when they arrived in the area, and your parents and grandparents, and then you as a young kid in Lexington?
Okay. Well, I'll try to do the best I can, and if I go off script or moment, you can pull me back. My father's family was Anthony Ross, and his 10 children came from a farming community, Woburn, nearby. And my father was always very proud that he grew up on a farm, but we never visited it. We never saw it. I had no idea where it was. And recently I learned that if you check out the address, which is I think something 50 Russell Place, that in Woburn, that is the current location of Woburn Four Corners. And I thought to myself, wow, you know. But they moved the family to Lexington in the early 1900s, and the first family home was 620 Mass Ave, which is it was a beautiful property. It's on the list of historic places.
The home with the columns.
The home with the columns.
It's still there.
It's still there. And again, I grew up on Fallen Hill. Never ever was mentioned that was a family home from 1920 to 1929. And when I found that out, I said, this can't be true. I mean, there must be some explanation, but I went to the library and I looked at one of the town directories with the help of one of the assistants, and lo and behold, Anthony Ross and Son, 1920 to 1929 at 620 Mass Ave. And then they moved, I thought this might be like upward mobility. They moved uptown, and there's a story to that, to 2173, again, a major house, historic property. Grandfather was in the construction business, Anthony Ross and Son, and built much of the modern town. And but it was major construction. It wasn't houses, so it was roads, sewers, streets. Well, I guess that's a road.
So he built roads in the town of Lexington,
yes,
for the benefit of builders who would then build homes on these roads.
One could conclude that. Yeah. The other major piece of work was 128. So Anthony Ross and Son was one of the contractors for 128. Not that I knew it at the time, of course. One of the things that was sort of fun, as I remembered, when we were children, or I was a youngster, I could walk in Lexington Center, and every fourth or fifth cement block, there would be, of the pavement, there would be a brass plaque, and it said Anthony Ross and Son, and they were up and down the avenue. I would love to have one of those now. But
I still see those around in certain places.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I will look down in my neighborhood. I think there might be one on Clark Street, and there might be one on Parker Street. I will check that out.
And there is actually, because Paul, I went looking for some of those, and I never found any Ross ones, but there's some on Forest Street.
Okay.
Really?
And maybe, I think I found Parker Street and Forest Street.
The one that I remember as a child were the ones that were near the post office.
Okay.
And it was brass, and it did say, I don't
It's
know,
like a medallion.
What?
It's like a medallion, and
Oh,
it's the contractor's pride in their work, and they
Yeah,
stamp it with the
Anthony Ross and
medallion.
Son, yeah.
So those you have to find a really old sidewalk to find those because they
I'm
haven't done them
sure.
for
I'm
years.
sure. I meant one time to go to the Department of Public Works and say, are they like your stuff that was just stuffed in the basement of the town offices? Would it be possible that they might be a couple there? But I've never gotten around to it.
Let's make sure we understand the time frame on this, though. Those sidewalks of Anthony Ross that were installed,
Right.
that would have been in the 1920s?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay. But you, growing up in the 40s, graduating in 53,
Right, correct.
you don't remember the active construction of Anthony Ross?
I do not, no. I do remember the office, the headquarters of the firm, which is over in Merritt Road, near where there's a gas station now, and Mawhinney automobile building.
Married at Lincoln, kind of.
Yeah, was Anthony Ross and Son prior to Mawhinney.
Okay.
So I do remember that. But there were a lot of things that happened that I'm very proud of now, but I think we just probably took it for granted. It was just
that's the way life was.
Yeah, it's what Mom and Dad did. Mother worked. I'll go back to the brothers in a minute, but my mother was the first woman to have an independent business in Lexington, as far as we know. And it was Betsy Ross Galleries, and it was she was an interior designer, worked for Charrick Furniture and a couple of other stores in Boston. But when she married my father, they moved to Oak Street first as a young couple. And I think it was a long time before she had her first child. And I think got bored and just decided to start her own business. And she commandeered some space in my father's store at the time.
Did your father start the business? The Ross Furniture and Radio business?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
There were several iterations of things that he tried to do or did do, depending on the fortunes of the day. I would say that one, I won't go into all the details, but one was an automobile dealership. That was Terraplane, Hudson, one or two others, but then the war came along and he couldn't get cars. So that he went out of business and just reinvented himself.
So it was the furniture reinventing,
yes,
and the radio reinventing during the war years or after the subsequent war years.
Yeah. So that, but I'll go back to the grandfather. So that business, as I understand it, was very prosperous, and you could tell by the amount of work that they did and so forth. So then you've got three brothers. There's Dominic, who is my father, Albert, and Joseph. And Albert was the oldest, and by some measures, probably the most successful. He was an MIT guy. He became president of the construction company. He went into the service in World War II. I think his highest rank was a lieutenant colonel. And then my father, I don't know why the other two brothers didn't do service, but I don't know the reason for that. And
your uncle Albert?
Yes.
He was the one who was a selectman for some years?
Yep.
And that would have been in the 30s, I think?
No, it was in the early 40s.
Okay. Well,
And
during the war years then.
Yeah, he resigned, as I remember it, he resigned to enter the war.
I see. Okay.
And then after the war, he became president of the construction company more formally, and that probably would have been a conflict of interest with being a selectman.
Right.
So I think that played into it.
I see. But you mentioned earlier, Paul, that he was involved with the initial construction of 128.
The firm was, yes.
The firm was. And originally 128 traveled Waltham Street and Woburn Street, and then the highway, the
Right.
limited access highway, if you will,
Right.
was built after the war, and I think opened in 51.
Could be.
Well, weren't you paying attention?
I was not.
He was having fun
when
at
did
the
you
high
first
school.
drive a car?
Oh, when I was 16.
Okay, and that would have been in 52, 53, 51, 52.
Yeah.
So you didn't race on 128, huh?
No, I did not.
Jeez,
I
I
had
did.
no idea that 128 was even a thought in anyone's mind.
Okay, so you were
I was totally oblivious.
You were very local.
We were very Lexington centric.
Yes,
centric.
Center-centric.
Could be, yeah.
Well, you grew up in East Lexington, right? Your parents moved from Oak Street to where?
Robbins Road.
Robbins Road. They built that house.
They built the house. Built the house during the Depression, which always fascinated me because my mother would say, you know, at a certain time there were 12 to 15 people working on the house just to get a wage. Of course, I had no idea what that meant. And I think the land was bought, best I can tell, the land, which is off of Merritt Road, was bought from the Tower Estate. And that was the beginning of the opening up of what we call Fallen Hill today. And
so you grew up on Robbins, and you spent your whole childhood there. You went to
there.
elementary school at
Adams. We walked.
Adams School.
We walked to Adams School, to and from, including noontime.
Back and forth.
Go home for lunch, believe it or not. And life in East Lexington at that time, for me anyway, was very much centered around the church, Sacred Heart Parish. And it was ball games and teams and things of that sort. And the playground for us was behind Adams School.
Right.
You know.
Well, wasn't there right at the Rotary, or no longer a Rotary, the traffic signal there, it's fallen in mass. Wasn't there a little grocery store there? Wasn't there a much more active commerce?
I believe so.
The Stone Store.
In the East Village.
In the East Village, yeah, I think so, right there. And also halfway up Mass Ave, just before Maple Street, there was a major store. It's been torn down.
Right.
But that was a major, not large, but fully stocked grocery store.
Neighborhood.
And I don't remember the name of it right now.
Right, the condos are there now, I think.
Yes, that's right. And we, we would shop there and lug things home up Tower Road or whatever.
So your life centered around East Lexington, but your dad and family business was in Lexington Center.
Good
so you
point.
actually lived two lives. So the East and the downtown were a vital part of your daily life. Yeah. However, you had mentioned before about this East Lexington Center divide, and that you've had some conversations with some of your East Lexington
I would
friends.
have to say, I don't know whether I was wrapped in a bubble or not, but I never ever felt discrimination or less than. And when I got to junior high school, which was in the old high school, I became very aware that there was, and I'm not even sure I knew what it meant, but there was a whole feeling of East Lexington being less than. That would be the polite way of saying it. And I never personally felt it while I was growing up in East Lexington. It just wasn't part of my reality. But once I got uptown, I became very aware that the uptown kids had an advantage in that they knew each other. I was fascinated by you went to XYZ school, or you went to Fisk or Muzzy or whatever, and you all know each other, and it was because of the close proximity of the schools and social functions like Miss Merrill dancing or dance classes or D. Malay. And so East Lexington was pretty predominantly Catholic. So D. Malay would have been kind of a foreign or a non-entity for them. But I remember saying, I know several people have had this conversation about the what I call the less than, and the prejudice and so forth. And again, I'm reiterating, I didn't personally feel it, but I became aware of it. But I was talking to Alan Wilson one time, because Alan and I are lifelong friends. And I said, I don't understand why there's so much talk about East Lexington or being less than, or, not desirable, if you will. And he said, oh yeah, in Alan's inimitable way. Oh yeah. He said, you grew up in Fallen Hill and you were smart. No wonder you didn't know anything, or whatever.
You're on the cusp of one or the other.
That
But I always
has come
remember
up
that.
time and time again, though, and I think now it's pretty much dissipated
I would think
because
so.
of population changes, and the people that really experienced it are not as, they're not here anymore. They're not.
Well, they're not. And also, because I suspect, I haven't given a lot of thought about this, but because land and homes in Lexington are so scarce today,
Right.
that just getting it is significant,
Right.
let alone where it may be located. And I think that's a good thing, because it's erased the barriers.
So you went to Muzzy,
Went to
and
Bussey.
then the high school, the new high school.
Right.
Well,
We did not.
No, the new high school opened in the fall of '53, and you graduated in the spring of '53 at the Muzzy, right?
Right.
You graduated at Muzzy,
Yes.
which was the
Right.
junior senior high school at
That's
the time.
correct. We were the last class.
You were
Right.
the last
in
class.
But the best class, you said.
Well, my friend David Wells and everyone else still in town of 53 believes that. Yeah.
Now, where was the graduation? At
Oh,
Cary
God.
Hall? I've heard of high school graduations
yes,
were
I
in
think
Cary Hall.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah.
And do you recall how big your class was? How many were in the class?
No, but there are people who can tell you
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure.
Lois and Dave can tell you.
Right.
Lois and Dave Wells can tell you. I cannot. I have no idea. But
So
it was.
after high school,
Yeah,
which you went right off to Northeastern,
I did.
did you
Yeah.
stay connected to the community outside of your college education period? That is, work at the family store.
Help me with the word community.
Well,
Lexington.
Lexington.
Oh,
Did you work in the family business during the college years?
No, I did not. My brother did. My older brother did. I did not. I did work, but I worked at Northeastern in the
I see.
library, actually.
So
Yeah.
you were quite committed and quite involved with the university, more so
At the-
than Lexington during those
At the
years.
time, yes, absolutely. I made up for it later, with some community activity and so forth and so on. But
So
was
after
quite-
your college,
Yeah.
you did your master's work at
Boston University,
and a doctorate from.
UMass Amherst.
Did you go out to UMass and stay there?
Yes, 2 days a week. I had. Let me back up. I said a
Yeah, we don't want to
context.
get too far into Amherst. We want to keep
Oh, no,
you in Lexington.
Lexington is fine. Boston is fine. I was doing my thing in Carlisle, and it just got to be so hard. Oh my God! So I said maybe I ought to
Your
go
thing
back.
was teaching.
Education.
Well,
Your
education.
degrees
yeah,
were
and
in
I was an
education.
administrator, and I was doing all these
Oh,
great,
okay.
great things, very often on an uphill fight. And I remember thinking, and there is an end to this story. I remember thinking that this is so hard. Maybe if you just go back to school, Paul, and learn something. Well, what I learned was common sense is pretty good skill to have, and that's what made me survive. But anyway, I went back to school, got a doctorate, never went back to public education, not because I intended to, but I discovered that adult learning was a wonderful capacity for me. And I got an internship at the MITRE Corporation, and then went from MITRE to digital equipment, where I had most of my career, and that was really, really fabulous.
So you were somewhat of a commuter from Lexington, because you lived in Lexington all
I
these
did,
years.
yeah. I commuted, and there were guys, 5 or 6 people, who carpooled. So none of
Okay.
us had cars. So we carpooled or took the MTA.
And during these years, you lived where?
Well,
Vine Brook
Robbins
Road?
Road. I lived at home during college years.
Okay.
And then after college and through some other circumstances, I lived away from Lexington. But when my mother died, and I'll go back to her in a minute, my mother died quite young, relatively, in 1963. My dad bought a lovely, lovely home on Vine Brook Road on the corner of Vine Brook and Sherman.
Right.
Which no longer exists because it's being torn down.
Right. Was it new when your folks moved in? Was it a new house?
No, it
Okay.
was built. It was built, I think, in 1927,
Okay.
and it was a copy of one of the Williamsburg houses.
Right.
So it had wonderful bones, and it was sited beautifully on the lot. Not that we did it, but.
So.
But it was interesting that my dad bought it after my mother died because the Robbins Road house was too big and too many memories, I think. And he bought the house a year before my sister was married, my sister Janet, because he wanted her to be married from her family home, which I think says quite a lot about him.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
thing. Can I segue back?
Yeah,
to
go back to
we
your
want to
mother.
get back to your mother and
Agnes. Yeah, well,
her business involvement in town.
She was an interior designer. My father and mother met in Billerica on Nuttings Lake.
Yeah.
There was a dance hall. So mother and her sisters would come from Boston to Nuttings Lake. I don't know how they got there or what was the attraction, but the Ross brothers, who were really good-looking guys, rather studly, as you might imagine, and they went to the dance hall on Saturday night, and my mother and father met there. And I don't remember the trajectory particularly, but one thing led to another. But that was even quite cheeky in that time for two maiden ladies. That's a curious term. Drive from Boston
To Billerica.
to Billerica in the 1920s or even 1919. I think
would
it's
have
just
guessed
quite
Normbega Park out down in Newton there at the Charles River. That was a very popular place.
Absolutely.
More common, I thought, than Nuttings Lake. But
Well, Nuttings Lake I'm talking in the 20s.
right.
Normbega was my period.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It was
40s,
a resort,
50s.
really,
I
Nuttings
don't
Lake.
even know if it still exists. But
Nutting Lake?
No, the dance hall.
Oh,
I
probably
doubt
not.
it.
Yeah.
So they met there and then became Mr. and Mrs. Ross.
Right.
And-
And mother.
And
got
then how
bored.
did Betsy come about?
Well, I don't know the origin, frankly, but when she decided she was going to open her own store.
Her name was Agnes, right?
Her name was Agnes.
Yeah.
And her maiden name is Lintemann, which is German. So her lineage is German and Irish. And my father's lineage is Italian. Maybe some Irish, I don't remember. So when I was doing diversity work, someone said, and I would use as an example, I would say, okay, I am of Italian heritage, but the name Ross obviously has been tampered with, and people would laugh and say, oh my God, right. Now, it was not Rossellini or Rossetti, or my dad always said, I don't know the real origin, but as I understand it, at Ellis Island, they just simply said, complicated name, new country, new name. So they lopped whatever they did. And then the other story, but it could be legend, I don't know if it's really that true, was there was a tremendous flood at Ellis Island at one point, and thousands of records were destroyed or never recovered.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we were every town record from 1900 on in regard to the family is Ross.
Mhm.
So
So the reference is
yeah,
Ross.
So that's
Okay, so we've got you in town.
yeah.
Your parents were operating Ross Furniture and Radio Store
Right.
in And your mother was part of that business.
She was part of the business, but her business, which she kept separate for the design work that she did, was Betsy Ross Galleries. I'd love to, can I show you something that I'm very proud of? Let me see, there's a letter that I found that was made obvious to me at one time in the town hall with Donna, and that's another story for another video. But there's a paragraph in it that I'm very proud of. First of all, this letter was written, mother is bidding on draperies for the selectman's office. And this is dated in August 1947. Think about that, folks. And she's talking about, she's including 3 samples and 6 windows for the princely cost of unlined draperies for $250. Okay. But then she concludes with, I think from an economy viewpoint, it would be better to wait until you could install a full-width lined drapery, as suggested in paragraph 2, because sun and general climate conditions tend to deteriorate unlined draperies and color facing out, which is generally accepted as correct. And so we're talking about general climate conditions in 1947. I read this and I said, who is this woman? So I'm very proud of that. And I just will show you, this is a sampling of part of the town records of the fabrics that she was recommending. And I've just discovered there's a pencil drawing on the back, which I won't show because it won't come up, of an approach to the curtains for town hall, the Cary Hall.
So in those days, the selectmen's meeting room, as Peter pointed out earlier, was in the second story front room in Cary Hall itself.
Above the 3 door entrances on Cary Hall, which faced the south and was very sun exposed. So I think your mother realized that in the winter, particularly with no shade, that those drapes would deteriorate quickly if they didn't have a protective lining.
Yes.
Because most people, of course, today will think of the selectmen's meeting room in the town office building. But it was always on the second floor.
Interesting, because my visualization of this has always been where the town offices are now.
Right.
Not
and it never sees the sun, except in the afternoon as it's setting.
Yeah. So Paul, you lived your mother and father's businesses. You gave us a lovely photo, which we're going to put in the video, of your sister in a commercial for a new TV. You must have.
Me to show that now?
I don't think it will show up, but you must have experienced, all the new gadgets. Your dad sold TVs. Your dad sold refrigerators. He was a car dealer, so you had like the newest of whatever.
Entrepreneurial. I mean, it's just.
Now, this was in the Hunt Block. We want to make sure people remember.
It was in the.
There is a picture, I think, of the store.
Right.
That's available on our video for you.
The store was L-shaped, so the furniture store was faced Mass Ave, kind of opposite what is now Theater Pharmacy, and the appliance store and radio repair was faced Depot Square. And that's what it did. Where you were headed somewhere.
Well, we were going with all of the appliances and goods that they sold, and that you spent a lot of time in Lexington Center. So I guess we'll get to the, what's your recollection of in the 40s and 50s of the town as a whole, Lexington Center and the schools?
Before I forget, because my train of thought will be crazy. Sometimes it's crazy. Dad was the first major television dealer in town, and that was in 1947 to 48. And he would host in the furniture store at night television programs. And the television, as you can imagine, were huge. And there'd be an audience of 25 or 30 people, which it was quite fun to watch that. Now, going back to my recollection of the center, first of all, everybody knew. My one recollection is that it seemed that everybody knew everybody. So, and you could, and all of the merchants knew each other. So whether it would be the people like Frank Reedy with Reedy's Men's Store, or Baker's, Bateman's department store, or Martin's pharmacy, there seemed to be a really good community, and it was small, and everybody knew each other. I think that
Was there a chamber of commerce at that time, or a business council?
Yes,
that brought the merchants together.
Absolutely. It was called the Lexington Board of Trade.
Yes.
My dad was president for many years, or several years. They would have the big event, and I have some pictures of it, which I won't show now. They would have a Board of Trade show every year, and they would give prizes and things of that. So it was a very active.
Might be compared to Discovery Day in Lexington at this time, when the Retailers Association tries to draw the different merchants that are willing to participate
yes.
into bringing their
They're good.
products
I hadn't made
to the
that
avenue.
connection, but it's a very good one. Yeah,
The-
I've often said it was the forerunner to the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I
Yeah.
think you're right.
And I have a listing of some of the members at that time, and you would recognize all of the names as movers and shakers over a period of time. You know, whether I'll use Ted Worthen as an example, and the Board of Trade had really substantial members, and they worked well together. It was not to my
All Lexingtonians for the most part.
Yeah.
The merchants lived in
Right.
town and had their business in town.
yeah, and that's what you did.
And they-
As we were growing up, you bought clothing at Reedy's Men's Store or Mayenza's later on.
Right.
And there would be food. There would be a Scribner's Market, and one or two others that escape me right now.
Well, First National was in the center, where
It was
most recently Panera was. There was an
Yes.
A&P before it moved up to
Yes.
Bedford Street. Do you recall an A&P in the center,
I do.
Paul, where it was?
I do. I don't. I want to say, just off the top of my head, I want to say it's where the Liberties building is now.
Well,
On
that's the
Bedford
second.
Street.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where that was the first new grocery store.
Wasn't that A&P?
That
Yes.
was A&P, but
Oh.
I thought prior to that, which opened up in the 50s, A&P had a store in the center itself. Perhaps not.
I don't remember.
Okay.
They may have, but I don't remember that.
Okay, fair enough.
I remember that First National was down where
Yes.
Panera is.
Right. Okay.
The bowling alley was down
bowling
below.
alley, the bowling alley, and then there was Dorothy Muriel's Bakery and one or two other things along that strip.
Yes, I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And there was a diner there. Do you recall the diner?
I do not. I think the diner was torn down
Okay.
before.
Lexington.
It might have been there during my
Right.
5 and 6. I don't remember the diner. I think, and that would have been. That's farther up
Yeah.
Mass Ave. It wasn't quite. It was before Waltham
Right.
Street,
Right.
but
Right.
after Panera.
Right.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There was-
That's funny. Yeah.
And you.
The other thing, going back, I'm doing one more thing, random thinker. One of the contributions that, in addition to this kind of letter, Mother designed the green shutters
Yeah.
that are on Santander Bank now
Yeah.
with the Minuteman
with the
cutout.
Minuteman cutout.
Yeah,
The
it was
corner of
done-
Muzzy Street and Mass Ave.
Yeah, that was when it was Lexington Trust.
That's quite a legacy for her, huh? Because
Yeah.
they're still, although they
there.
perhaps need some repair,
Yeah,
they're still there.
yeah.
So if you go down Muzzy Street to Forest Street, you mentioned earlier Miss Merrill's dancing.
The Belfry Club.
The
yeah.
Belfry Club. What were the other, and through the high school folks have mentioned some other clubs that
Well, there was
existed.
a club, a terrific youth club called Promenaders, and Bill Maloney of Arlex and his wife and 2 or 3 other people were kind of sponsors of that. And they would run dances every month.
Was that out of the Belfry Club, or where was that?
So. I think so, yeah.
I recall, you recall the tennis court dances that took place in the spring?
I do not.
Okay, because they were down on tennis courts.
Yeah.
They were sponsored by the Promenaders.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't remember them, but they were probably part of my era.
Was that an independent group, Peter, the
No,
Promenaders, or was it through the high school?
It
or
was
what
through
was
the
it?
high school, and it sort of started falling apart when I was there in the 60s. But my older sisters all were very active in Promenaders Club.
Yeah, it was a fun.
It was a
fun
fun
group.
thing, and you're right. They had dances at Belfry Club, and which was a social club in itself. But we want to catch up, keep going with Paul, because he's got the time period we're interested in.
Yeah.
The Hunt Block.
The Hunt Block.
And all that was going on in town. In those, let's see, you say your dad moved to Vinebrook Road, which is right in the center, in 63.
Right.
By that time, you were well on your way into your professional life.
Correct.
But you lived at Vinebrook Road.
I did, yeah.
For many years.
Many years. I loved living there. When my father died, I was living in town, in another town, we refer to Boston in town, but I was working for digital in a number of capacities. At one point, I was director of human resources for one of the major divisions for New England and New York. And so I traveled a great deal. But when my dad got older, I spent more time at Vinebrook and really loved it. It was a great house. And when I remember being in the yard or whatever, and people would walk by and they would say, "I love your house." And I would say, "I love my house."
Do you recall?
It was heartbreaking when it was torn down.
It was. I'm sure. Yeah. Do you recall across the street, Burt Stewart?
Sure, but yeah, absolutely.
Because he was chairman of the Lexington Savings Bank for many years.
I may not have remembered that, but
Right.
yes, and I remember when they moved, they were among the first residents of Brookhaven.
Oh.
I think he was president of Brookhaven.
Could have been. Yes, you're right. They moved just when it opened, when Brookhaven opened.
And that, at the time, that was the largest house on the street.
Well, that house was on Massachusetts Avenue. There were 3 houses on Vinebrook that were taken where Viano's Buick. You remember the Viano Buick station?
Bought my first car. Well, we were a Buick family. And so when I was on my own, I bought my first car from Bud Viano.
Okay. But when that went down, actually, I take that back. It was when Viano built, and I was not around, thank you very much, that I was told, and Burt Stewart told me the story, that his house and 2 others on Vinebrook were all part of a very large house that was where the Viano garage was. And they dragged them around the corner and brought them and placed them. Actually, I think Burt Stewart's house was taken back off the avenue, and they came through the back way and set them. I don't recall what the other 2 houses are.
Well, one is, if you go up Vinebrook Road, it's the second or third in, it looks like a barn.
Yes,
It's
on the
brown.
left, as you go up from Waltham Street.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
That's one of them.
I don't remember the other
ones.
Oh.
Yeah.
All interesting.
Yeah.
So
I've lived elsewhere, but I've been a local guy.
So, Paul, shifting a little bit, you were very young during World War II, very young. Do you have any recollections of life on Robbins Road?
Yes.
When the war started and when Lexington...
Well, I remember actually several things. I'll probably do them at random. I remember the Victory Gardens. And I think there was one on Waltham Street, which a family by the name of Milliken lived there. I think they're condos now. I remember blackouts. I remember one night there was a blackout, and we were on the porch on Robbins Road, and a fire warden or a war warden yelled at my father to douse the cigarette. You know, so that was one. I remember radio broadcasts, particularly at Christmas time, when there would be a Christmas show broadcast from one of the bases for like Bob Hope or somebody. When
this was radio.
Yeah, all radio. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes, it was all radio. I don't remember any. Well, the war was over when television came in, so no, it was all radio. Right. And then my own personal behavior, for lack of a better word. No one ever said to me, the war is over there. And so I was a very imaginative kid, and I thought the Nazis might be right at my door. So we had in a game room downstairs very large bowling pins. And I measured how long it would take me to get with a bowling pin from any one of the rooms in the house. If I were in an upstairs bedroom, how long
if you had to go get a bowling pin for defense?
Yeah.
To
if
throw
the
it?
Nazis came.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I apparently never discussed it, because someone would say, well, wait a minute, they're not here. But I didn't know that as a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or whatever I was. Yeah, I remember from every room, I figured out that it would take me 3 minutes to get from my parents' bedroom down to the basement, or vice versa. I hadn't thought about that in years. This is fun.
Before we tie things up, any other special recollections that...
Second World War.
Yeah, well, that's what... you were actually probably in elementary school, early grades at that point. Was there any school-related activities for the war?
Oh, Donna, I'm sure, but I'm not sure. We would have every week there'd be a postage stamp. I think we bought war bonds, or we bought stamp books. And for 50 cents, you got a stamp and put it in a book. I remember that. Gosh, I haven't thought about these things in a long time. The Pledge of Allegiance was important. Yeah. Things like whatever you did with canned goods you take the top and the bottom. You take the top of a can and the bottom, and take it off, and then crush the can, and then
to recycle the tin.
Yeah. I remember doing that, and I remember oleo bags. Oleo with
put the color in.
Yeah, with a little button of color.
Right.
And so, but I don't know if those are really war stories, but.
Now, you were born in 35?
35.
So
you
were
first in public.
7, 8, 9, 10 during the war. Do you remember when the war ended in the celebrations?
I do. These are good questions. I do. I was at summer camp, and we were routed out of our bunk beds like in the middle of the night for a flag ceremony in the early morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have been VJ Day in August.
Yes.
Of 45.
Well, I couldn't have told you the day, but it was in August.
Right.
Yeah.
What camp was that?
Camp Frank A. Day. And
in New Hampshire?
No, it was in East Brookfield, Mass.
Okay.
Which I'd never heard
Central
of.
Mass.
And it was a Boy Scout camp. No, I was never a Boy Scout, but it was a Boy Scout or a YMCA. I guess.
YMCA.
Is that a Boy Scout?
No.
Oh, it's a YMCA camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And several Lexington boys went. I was there during a polio outbreak.
Ooh.
And it was a rainy, awful summer. And we had to stay quarantined. We couldn't come home. And my family this wasn't anything that I really wanted, but I had to stay at camp during that time because my older brother was home.
Oh,
I wasn't nearly happy with that.
so you had to stay there until what? Labor Day, or when schools opened up?
Whatever the quarantine period was.
Passed.
So
Oh, I see.
yeah,
Okay.
so I don't know whether it was like, I do remember I was packed and set to go home. And the word came, no, you can't. You have to stay another 2 weeks. Well, of course, it's raining and damp. And now that I'm recalling it, flannel sheets are not fun
Oh.
when they're damp.
Flannel sheets.
Flannel sheets, because there was no heat and we were,
Oh, yeah.
and it would get cold at night,
Sure.
Well, I'm sure that any kind of sheet would be less fun.
Wet.
But the flannel sheets, I remember that well.
Paul, do you remember in Lexington the boys' club that was at the corner of Fletcher, what they call Fletcher Park now, I think? It was a big building there.
Yeah.
And it was torn down probably in the 50s, but it was
A boys' club.
Yeah, it was before I remember the building being there, but by my day the Hayden had been opening up.
Sure.
But there was also a Catholic Catholic club on Waltham Street.
Right. It was
Really?
the house. It was a women's social.
Yeah, something.
I forget the name of that,
Okay,
but
so,
we were actually.
But I'm
yeah.
relating to that to your Vinebrook Road residency,
Yeah.
and that was long after that time. You were on
Yeah.
Robbins Road for all
I was
those
on
years.
Robbins Road all during my
Right.
college years.
Right.
And then,
You shared some.
because my dad, when my mother died, my dad moved a year later.
Now, do you
to
recall the train? You showed the
Mhm.
train coming out from Boston
I do.
and the different train stations. Did you ever use the train to get into the city? And
To go to Northeastern?
No, to get it, that's a good. The train, I believe, had expired by the time I went to Northeastern. I never took it to go to Northeastern.
It actually was running until the mid-70s.
Oh, really?
78?
However,
So-
I don't think it was probably the most direct route to get to Northeastern.
So you
but,
drove-
but you had a carpool.
I remember the bus that came from
We had to
Maynard
close it up.
to go to Harvard Square.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I would stand, the bus stop would be at the base of Tower Road.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that would go to Harvard Square and then however
Through
else
the
we-
Heights. The Heights was a good
Yeah. They
depot
go
there
up over
for.
the Heights Hill. Yeah.
It's
What
very
was the
interesting.
So we're-
what was the other question about?
I was just curious about if there was perhaps you used the train station. I think there was a
Oh,
train
the
station
train station.
by Maple Street.
Yeah, I
Right.
took the train,
Pierce's
probably
Bridge?
not
For the other.
as a young adult or a teenager, but with a member of the family or a babysitter
Sure.
or something like
Right.
that, to go from Lexington to Boston.
Right.
And and I remember going. My mother's sister lived with us for a number of years, and she worked in Boston. And I would go as a kid to meet her train at Pierce's
Bridge.
Right.
Station.
Yeah.
There were two. There was one on Maple Street
Right.
and one up near where Seasons 4 is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Right.
up further
And it
by
was-
Toyota,
It
too,
was
behind
what,
Toyota.
in the back of Toyota,
Yeah.
and that had been there just
Yeah, I don't.
the last
Yeah.
40
I
years or
don't
so.
remember that, but I do remember Pierce's Bridge at Maple Street.
Paul, you've shared some lovely memories with us, and you've got some great photos we're going to incorporate into the video,
Oh,
too.
that's great.
Any other last minute before we sign off here? And thank you for your...
No, I think we've done a broad brush. I'm pretty garrulous. I could talk for another hour.
No, that's fine. It's comfortable. It's nice. We appreciate the perspectives that you can offer us and keep them in
Check.
perpetual value.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so
Thank
we
you. I've
captured it today.
enjoyed it very,
Yeah,
very
it's been
much.
fun.
Well, enjoy the rest and keep making memories in Lexington.
Yeah.
You got me full time.
And we're gonna get you together hopefully this summer with your high school classmates,
Sure.
David and Lois, and Lynn Wilson and Bud
Bud Downey.
Downey. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would
that
be
should be a
group.
real food fight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'll be
that-
fun.
That's a good group.
So I think with that, we thank you and we welcome our viewers to catch this video on YouTube, not too far in the distant future, and all of the other interviews that we've done. And Paul's actually going to join us on the committee to do some more interviews of other groups too.
I've had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You made it comfortable and you asked great questions.
And you gave great answers.
To go off track.
It's all good information. Fun to have.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching this today.